Remember that in the last few lessons, we've been focusing on how the Nez Perce homeland shaped or sustained their culture. And we talked about the Nez Perce homeland, and we've talked about culture. We've read lots of different articles and pieces of writing. So if I want to find out some information about their homeland, I'm going to look at my coding system. When I read Handout 5A, when I read 6A through 6F, and I read 7A, I used these letters. So when I look for HL, I will see some information about their homeland that I can add to my graphic organizer. So this right here, it said that they lived in the prairies and river valleys of north central Idaho, Montana. So I'm going to add that information right here. Prairies, river valleys, in north central Idaho, Montana, northeastern Oregon, and southeastern Washington. It was about 17 million acres of land. I also see right here where I wrote HL, it says that their homeland's abundant resources, so lots of natural resources. If I look down a little bit, HL occupied the plateau culture area of the Northwest. And all of this information is coming from Handout 5A. So I'm going to put 5A in parentheses. Their traditional homeland occupied nearly 13 million acres. Wow, that's a lot of land. It's a little different than this one, so it also says 13 million. And that looks like that's all my information from my first source. So I'm going to look through my others. Do I see anything else about homeland HL? Oh, here we go. Mountain streams or rivers. So their homeland had mountain streams and rivers. And that came from Handout 6A. Homeland down here. People in other areas use grass plant fibers. So there's lots of grass. And that comes from 6B. Homelands, they lived on the plains, according to this text. 6C. And it says that it gave them everything they needed. Homeland, homeland, homeland. Lots of stuff in this one. Homeland. Nothing played house. The girls pretend camp. So they got the supplies that they needed from their homeland, which I said lots of resources over here. So I can just add that there. So these are some of the ways that the homeland added to the culture, to their resources. So then I think about Nez Perce culture. I read a lot about culture. I read about the stories that they tell. I read about food and drink. I read about homes and shelter. I read about tools and clothing and gender roles and religion. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to, I know that culture has to do with beliefs and values, which we're going to call religion. We read a lot of information about religion and the Nez Perce religion. I also read a lot about gender roles, which is another part of culture. I read about religion, gender roles, food, and drink. I read about their homes or shelter. And I read about clothing. I also read about tools, and tools are what kind of made their life easier. So I know I'm really interested in religion, tools, and gender roles. So I'm going to specifically look through my text and find information to write about those things. When I go through 5A, I noticed that I found information about storytelling and moral teachings, which links back to what they believe or their religion. They talk a little bit about how they hunted and found plant, fish, and game, and they lived in pit houses for shelter. If I flip to the back end of this, it also talks about the atlatl, and the bow and arrow. And it talks about how everything they needed came from the land they lived in. So I've gone through 5A. I'm now going to go through handout 6A, 6B, 6C, 6D, 6E, 6F, and 7A to look for information that I can add to my chart about each aspect of their culture. Now that I have finished going back through the text and looking for information about each aspect of culture, I am going to pick one aspect of culture that I'm most interested in. So I am most interested in religion. So the religion or their beliefs and values are very interesting to me. So I'm going to take out handout 7B. And at the top, I'm going to write my topic is their beliefs, values, and religion. The next part says, how did the Nez Perce homeland shape or sustain this aspect of Nez Perce lifestyle or culture? So I have to go back and I have to think, how did the homeland shape what they believed and valued and what they thought about creation? So the next part says, evidence. What details in the text show how the Nez Perce homeland shaped or helped to sustain this way of life or cultural aspect? So that's the first part. The second part is that I need to copy the quotation from the text, close the quotation marks, and paraphrase, or retell what the quotation says in my own words. Then I need to write where I found the information, and I need to elaborate. So, how did the homeland shape or sustain religious beliefs and values? So if I go back to my chart, I know that I can find information in 5A, I can find information in 6E, 6E. So I really need to go back to handout 5A, 6E, And, okay, so 5A and 6E. So I'm going to go back into those texts and I'm going to reread those, 5A and 6E. Pause the video and do the same. So when I went back into 5A, I noticed that the homeland really shaped this aspect of culture, religion, and their beliefs and values because the homeland, the land that they lived in, was the setting for the stories that they shared. And also, when I go to 6E, I see that they had a close spiritual connection with the environment or the land, and they honored the environment. So now I have two ideas that I can write about in my graphic organizer. What details in the text showed how it shaped? Well, I need two ways that it shaped. Well, first, it was the setting for stories, and they had a close connection with the land. I want you to take time and I want you to decide which aspect of culture are you most interested in? Clothing, shelter, or food and drink? I want you to select one of those options and write it at the top of Handout 7B. So at the top of 7B, your topic is either going to be clothing, shelter, or food and drink. Write that in now. Now, based on that aspect of culture that you chose, I want you to go back into the handouts associated with that piece of culture. So if I choose clothing, I'm going to go back to handout 6B. If I choose shelter, I'm going to go back to 6C and maybe 5A. And if I choose food and drink, I'm going to go back to 5A and 6A to find information. I'm going to use a highlighter and highlight that information.